Do you think that that's true, that some women are just totally fine after their divorce?
She's dying inside and she's trying to piece it all together so that it makes sense. Because deep down inside, she also feels awful. She feels completely ashamed by filing for divorce.
Most of my audience, most of you that are going to watch this video are men and men who are divorced. And you have, I think, a really unique opportunity today in this video because you have two women here to talk to you about divorce, why women get divorced, what women are thinking during divorce. And I have an amazing guest with me today to help us understand divorce from the other side, from the perspective of the women who go through it. Because for so many of my clients, and I know for so many of you who are watching this, that's part of the incredibly painful, challenging part, right? Is how can she do the things that she does? Why does she do the things that she does? It's confusing, it can be hurtful. So this is the opportunity we have today, is to get some insight into that. So Christina, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. This is Christina Cuevas. She has the Her Heart Heals podcast, and she helps women move on from divorce. Christina, will you just tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Thank you so much for having me as well. I know we have connected in the past, and I feel like every time we talk, it feels like I'm talking to an old friend. So, thank you so much. I think our connection is so special, and I'm excited to share. Yeah, so about 6 years ago, I went through something that completely destroyed my life. I went through a divorce, and in trying to find ways to heal, I discovered that there weren't a whole lot of resources at that time that were there for me to have the tools that I needed to heal emotionally. And so I began documenting my own healing journey. I do have a background in personal development. I've done a lot of personal development work and worked with a lot of coaches and mentors and things like that. And so I kind of kept going with what I was learning for myself. And I began documenting that with what is now Her Heart Heals. And I began our podcast, which is called Her Heart Heals Divorce Radio, in which I also interview other experts, people around the divorce community that also provide tools and wisdom around divorce and their own perspective, so that we could all heal together. I began down this road, and I don't necessarily consider myself a coach. I definitely like to think of myself more as a guide, because healing really does come from within. And so if I can help guide my clients to heal themselves, that's really what I want to do. So
Christina, that's beautiful. And I love the way you put that, right? To be a guide and a partner in their internal healing process as opposed to a coach necessarily. And I can just tell you, I know for a lot of my clients and a lot of the men I talk to, they are going to be really excited because you have two perspectives that they don't get access to a lot. And that is a woman who's been through her own divorce, right? But also a woman who gets to spend all of this time inside the minds of other divorced women and understanding what that experience is like. So I would love to start with kind of a challenging topic. And I say challenging because it's been a little confronting for me to think about, because it's something that I have seen in myself. But what I hear from a lot of my clients as one of the most difficult things for them to understand is they often have this experience of being so close to their partner, right? Of feeling like she's everything, we're a team, we're best friends. And for a lot of them, the moment, if she's the one who chooses a divorce, they often have this experience that like it happened so suddenly, like one minute she was my person and the next she was so cold to me that she couldn't go from like, I love you to just this full stop. And for what I see a lot of men struggling with then is, one, how is that possible, right? And also, it feels like such a betrayal. And a lot of them start to doubt that the love that they experienced ever even was real. Like they feel like maybe that was all a lie. And so this is something my husband and I were actually talking about, is what is happening? Because part of me was like, well, no, that's not totally true. And there's other things going on. But if I really stop and look at it, that is a pattern that I do see. And it does seem like something that a lot of women experience and a lot of men experience from the other side. And I wonder if you could speak to that a little, Christine. Is that something you have experience with? And what do you think is happening there?
Yeah, Yeah. Are you talking about prior to the divorce?
Yeah,
Is that what you're sort of where it all
like that there's this
begins?
moment that leads to the divorce. For instance, I recently spoke to a man who, he said just a few weeks ago, it felt like she was my best friend and I was the most special person. And we had, 12 years together. And now she is so just done with me, cold, even mean to me, like telling me that it's my fault and she's, it's my problems. I've heard men describe it as it feels like some switch flips and one minute she loves me and the next minute she hates me and they can't understand how that happened or what happened, and so I would say usually in the men's mind it's maybe the moment that creates the divorce, but I don't that's obviously not what's happening internally for the women.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for clarifying. So it definitely is something that may seem sudden on the outside, but what I have found is that it's often a lot of small miscommunications. The things that I find with my clients, when they go into a marriage, they go in feeling like a wife should be a certain way, the way that society thinks a wife should be. A lot of times it is imposing that sort of submissive behavior, and a lot of times what I have found is that women don't often really speak up about the issues that they're feeling in depth because they feel like they wanted to be a loyal wife. And so, what I have found, and even in my own experience as well, is that little by little, a part of us dies in trying to communicate it, not necessarily understanding how. Maybe as well, they're meeting with their partner that doesn't know what to do with the communication that they're being given. They don't have the tools to sort of talk it through and say, this is a much bigger topic. We need to really dive in. Maybe let's get some help. I think there's a lot of signals and signs that we're not equipped or prepared to handle. And typically, by the time that therapy comes into play, it's too late because this person has little by little slowly died inside. By die, I mean the flame inside. And oftentimes, with what I think you're referring to as like the event where one day one small thing happens and then it's like all of a sudden they are acting different or they're completely over it, and it's typically because it's been a long time, and that one instance, as micro as it may seem, is often the straw that breaks the camel's back, if you will. And women can just quickly shut down. There's nothing left to give on that side. And so that's typically what I've seen, is that it's a lot of smaller incidents that people don't necessarily know how to talk through.
It's really tragic, right, that that's happening. And it also brings to mind that there must be so much effort exerted to continue to play the role of the good wife while that's happening internally.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think by effort, I think a lot of people think that staying quiet is the effort. Maybe if I just stay quiet and I don't bring it up and I don't disrupt his day, it'll get better. Maybe if I don't bring this up right now and I just let us enjoy this time together, it'll get better later. There will be another better time to bring it up. And I think that also, to be fair, it does require effort to not speak up. But at the same time, I think people might have the wrong idea as to what the correct effort is in that moment.
What is it when you say like it might get better, right? If I just stay quiet, maybe if I, don't rock the boat, maybe if I just keep being the good wife, what is it you think that she's hoping will change? What is it that she's wanting that she's not getting?
Yeah, it goes back to really the miscommunication. I think she's really wanting her partner to meet her where she's at. But unfortunately, what I've seen is that it's two different languages. And even though there may be an attempt to say, I don't feel appreciated, that's a very broad statement to make, and expecting the other person to understand and to know exactly what that person is feeling. And so I think that's where the disconnect is.
Okay. It almost sounds right like there's a different language, right? The language that the woman is speaking and the language that the man is speaking, and they're not hearing and seeing each other. But even with those two languages, neither of them quite have the words to
Mhm.
put to what they're actually experiencing, right? I want to feel appreciated, but what does that mean, right? And I want you to
Yeah.
see and understand me, but I don't even really know exactly what that could look like.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that unfortunately, their therapy and people that have the ability to help deconstruct those broad statements are brought in much later in the game that ultimately result in the downfall. And I really advocate for people to seek help as early as possible because, those little bits can be so damaging. And oftentimes by the time they say let's go to therapy, it's often too late.
At that point where it's too late, Christina, what's happening internally? And I know I'm being so general. I'm like, what's happening for women? How would you describe like the change that she's experienced internally?
Yeah, I think that the change is often reflective of a decision of where she has chosen to focus her attention on.
Okay.
As someone who has played a role of a wife before and been in a marriage, as well as speaking to some of my clients, they often have felt that they're making this sacrifice to be a good wife and be a good partner and have made all of this attempt, but all of this focus is external or on their partner. And they have sort of made that decision. I am now going to focus on me and my happiness because that really is, I am not myself anymore. I am not happy anymore. And if I don't do something to help myself, I don't know how I'm going to survive out of this.
Okay. I'm glad you used that word, Christina. I don't know how I'm going to survive. One of the protests or the frustrations I hear from a lot of the men I talk to are they can't understand how she could choose to make that shift in focus, right? To say, I'm going to focus on, I hear this especially from men who have children, for instance. And it's been interesting. I see for a lot of men with kids, there's a very deep belief that the best thing for the kids is for the family to stay together. And I don't know, obviously I can't speak to all men. A lot of my viewers are very logical, problem solving kinds of brains. Very disproportionate number of my clients are engineers. It's like find the thing that's broken, fix it. That's how their brains work and make sense of things. And so they pull all this evidence, right? And there's so much evidence in the world that says, well, it's better for children if the parents stay together, or kids of divorced homes have all of these problems. And so they'll come to me with all of this evidence that this divorce is the worst thing for their children. And then they can't understand how she could choose herself over the children. And that's how they see her choice. But when you just said it, that's why I'm glad you used that word survive, because I think what a lot of them don't realize is the intensity of what she's feeling. I'm choosing my happiness or my freedom over my family. It's more of a survival level decision she's making.
Yeah. And this may be a really poor analogy. And so I apologize in advance, but it's the only thing that comes to mind right now and how to explain it. They say that glue traps for rats or mice in your home are inhumane because oftentimes when the mouse gets stuck in this glue trap, they start to bite off their own limbs in order to become free because they feel trapped. So they go to this extreme. And I think that women in this position have exhausted all efforts and they almost feel trapped in this corner because at the end of the day, your partner who you're married to is the person that you're with a majority of the time. You have to sleep next to them, you live with them, you're so involved with them. And a lot of times they really feel backed into a corner that there really is no hope. And as much as they do love their children, they're also so hard on themselves where they're feeling driven to increase their alcohol intake. A lot of times they go to prescription medication, anything that they can do to sort of feel happy, and also realizing that their children are witnessing them in this behavior. And they often feel that it is also not setting a good example for their children to witness a parent being so miserable and unhappy. There really is no faking that emotion. So again, it's feeling like if I don't go out of this or come out of this, I will harm myself.
And it sounds like maybe they already are in some ways.
Yeah, oftentimes a lot of them are, they seek vices in other things, they develop addictions, even things like shopping. Excess shopping is an addiction, anything trying to numb themselves. And I think that's when they make that internal choice and saying that this is not healthy anymore and I need to save myself.
Christina, can you help me and definitely for my viewers here, help us understand what is the root cause of why she feels so trapped? Because I know for some of the men who might listen to this, they're at this moment might be feeling like, what have I done, right? How have I somehow made her feel like this when that's not their experience of their marriage? Why does she feel so desperately trapped?
It really goes back to that miscommunication. I really think that that plays a really big role. 9 times out of 10, there is a shift in the communication. People are not communicating the way that they should effectively. And a lot of times as well, women just want someone to witness what they're feeling and actively participate in the relationship without the children. So I do think that that is also another big reason that I see is that they're so separate as far as what their lives look like, where they spend a majority of their time. And so women often feel alone.
You just said witness. I want someone to witness what I'm feeling. Something I see a lot in my work and honestly in my marriage too, at times, is that for a lot of men, when they understand a problem, they want to fix it. Right? It's that engineer brain again. There's a problem, let's fix it. So the response to an emotion is often a solution.
Yeah.
Right? Which is not satisfying.
Right.
I don't want you to solve my problem. I want you to understand that I'm in pain and witness that or be present with me in that. I know from the other side too, that's not always easy to do, right? Because offering a solution, I do this myself, right? My husband struggles with depression. It's much easier to offer him fixes to feel better than it is to sit and be with him in the pain of that. And so could you speak a little to the how, Christina, when you say, most women want someone to witness what they're feeling and be active participants in a relationship? How do you do that?
I think when I talk about how people don't often have the proper communication tools to be able to fully express back to that line, I don't feel appreciated, and that being such a broad statement. I think when you can be a witness for someone, it's also a window into being able to understand the full spectrum of the feeling.
Okay.
And so oftentimes witnessing, or like you said, just being there with the person, showing your support, a lot of times that's when the words can start to flow, because that's where the vulnerability is really shown. And that's where we start opening up to the people that are there to witness that emotion. And it becomes easier to express the full spectrum of the feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. It sounds like there's a real element of creating safety.
Yeah.
With witnessing.
Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Because I don't feel appreciated. So often that's said in anger, right? And if you're angry, you're not feeling safe, right? Because anger, that's what anger is, right? It's our fight response to a threat. So maybe by being a witness to the emotion, it creates enough safety to actually talk about what it is you're feeling.
Yeah. And like how you said with your clients, where they're wanting to just find a solution, it's tough to witness. It's tough to sit with the feeling. It's very uncomfortable. So I can see how, there must be such a disconnect with what's happening with two people in a marriage that just want two completely different things, even on a communication level, right? One just wants a straight solution, and the other one wants, no, come sit with me in this feeling and just be here with me in the feeling and feel it with me.
Yeah. Yeah. He wants the solution. She wants a companion, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that pain. I see a lot, I think so much of that two languages comes down to our cultural stories, right? Men are so well taught that their emotions really don't have that there's not room for them, that they need to control them, they need to not feel them, don't be a pussy, don't be a wuss, right? So there's such a disconnect from those emotions. And they've really been taught your job is to find a solution, control it, fix it, move forward, produce something, make something, build something. And this idea of just sitting and being present with a feeling, one, I think they don't have the skills, but two, I don't know if they have the context to understand why that would matter.
Yeah, which is why your work is so important in really helping men connect with their emotions and discover how to best express them or feel them, even just to learn how to sit with them. I think it's so needed because, like how you said, men culturally were taught to have one role. But I think that also goes both ways. Same thing with how women were taught to be this good wife and what their idea of a good wife is. But what people don't realize is that there is such a shift in, lives at this point in where the world is. Women are often working moms. There's, not a whole lot of stay-at-home moms, or the world just looks so much different than it did when these roles were created. And so I think it's also about being able to recognize where we are at today and being able to bring that relationship into modern times and understanding that the shift between a man and a woman also may fluctuate with what some of those roles require of each other.
Yeah, because there's such an immense pressure now, right? If you're holding on to the traditional be a good wife, but now you're also supposed to be successful in your career or successful entrepreneur, you're trying to fill many different roles at the same time, which is a lot of pressure. I also had the tail thought because I do have a number of clients whose wives were stay-at-home moms. And I just had the thought too that even if you are in that role in this modern world, there's pressure there too because you're not, having a career also. And
Yeah, I was just about to say that because with that as well, you also bring into the mix social media and the pressure that women also receive to look a certain way. So it's not just as simple of being a stay-at-home mom, but you're also a stay-at-home mom and you're seeing some other moms where they are, there's a push to look a certain way and they put a lot of pressure on themselves, on their body. And I do see that a lot as well. Yeah, being a stay-at-home mom looks very different today than it did 100 years ago.
Christina, how do you help your clients? So they get to this kind of breaking point where they say, I can't focus on the external, I have to do me, or I'm not going to make it through this. How do you help them navigate that? And what does that journey look like?
So I begin working with women once the divorce process has been initiated. And I do mean like legally. And the first few months, once the divorce is finalized, it really is such a personal journey. It's not something that I typically do a whole lot in, as in my work directly one-on-one. I often just like to provide women the tools to self-soothe. So we essentially start there. A lot of the information that I give and a lot of things that I teach are tricks and tips to self-soothe through those dark times, because really when you go through a divorce, you feel so alone. It's really not anything that women often talk about with their girlfriends. These true feelings are, I find, are best healed by oneself. And so I typically will do a lot of guided journeys. And by that, I'm very, very much an advocate for somatic work. So a lot of breath work, a lot of healing with meditation. We also utilize EFT tapping, a lot of things to help women help themselves. And then once they feel ready to start talking about some of their feelings or ready to begin that process where they begin to move on, that's when I start working with clients. So we definitely discover a lot of the layers of who they were in their marriage, who they were before their marriage. And we start to go into things like boundaries, things like developing routine and starting to create and envision a life for themselves in the future and what they want that to look like, while also utilizing those emotional tools that I teach them early on.
As you're describing the need for those emotional tools and that somatic work, and one of the things I often hear from my clients is that she seems fine, right? They're in this pit. I've heard it described as a black hole. Many of them tell me they've considered taking their own lives at some point in that divorce process. So they're having a very intense emotional experience, which is what you're describing. But a lot of them look at her on the outside and feel like she just seems fine. Do you, and I know again, this is incredibly general, and I'm speaking about a lot of different individual women as though this is just every woman's experience. But what would you say to a man who's like, I am going through hell, and she seems to be perfectly happy? What would you say to him? Do you think that that's true, that some women are just totally fine after their divorce?
She's dying inside as well. A lot of women are really good at putting up walls, putting on a front, and being able to sort of separate things, separate their emotions from what's happening around them.
I mean, what you just said, I said, are any women just fine after divorce? Because I hear a lot of men, that's one of the complaints. She's fine, I'm dying. You just said she's dying inside. And I realized that those are the same men who've had the experience that she went from being in love with them to being so cold. And now she seems just fine. If she, as you're describing what her internal experience might be like, right, that she feels cornered and trapped and almost like she's cutting off parts of herself to survive. While all of that's happening on the inside, she was so good at being a good wife that you couldn't tell, and it felt so sudden to you, then it would make perfect sense that she seems fine now, right? She
Yeah.
didn't show that weakness, that vulnerability in the marriage, and she's not showing it in the aftermath.
Yeah. I mean, I can even think of, I don't know if you've heard about how if a woman sees her child trapped under a car, all of a sudden that woman could gather the strength to lift up that car for the love of her child. And I think oftentimes once women make this decision to move on, it's firm in their belief and everything that expresses outwardly from them. So there are men who are saying, well, gosh, she just moved on. It's so sudden. She really is going through all of the things underneath the surface. But as I mentioned earlier on, it's such a lonely process. Nobody could possibly understand all of the feelings and everything that you're going through in that black hole. During that black hole period, it's like you have a complete Rolodex filled with memories. And she is constantly replaying those memories over and over and over in her head and trying to make sense of this catastrophic event that just happened, right? And she's trying to piece it all together so that it makes sense. Because deep down inside, she also feels awful. She feels completely ashamed by filing for divorce. That's not something that anybody even wants to strive for. Nobody is proud of that. It's a tough thing to go through. And like I said, it's lonely island, because we often have to overcome that, and only you as an individual can overcome your own divorce. And until you're ready to heal, then things start to come outward. But, women are pretty strong when it comes to emotions. And so they're definitely able to keep things below the surface.
Thank you for saying all of that, because what you just
Yeah.
described is what so many of the men I talk to are struggling with. That Rolodex of memories, the replaying, the trying to understand, to make sense, to find some sense of peace, the shame, the loneliness. Sometimes I'm just boggled, Christina, by the tragedy of divorce,
Yeah.
because you have two people who, what their internal experience is like is so similar, but they can't find each other. They can't connect or help each other through that. It really is quite heartbreaking that that is happening to so many people.
Yeah. What is it? 1 out of every 2 marriages ends in divorce, or every 4?
I think it's might be 1 and 2. I have some clients who will have the data. Because they will also have the data that says that your second marriage is more likely to end in divorce than your first marriage. And that's a fear I hear a lot is I don't want to be alone, but I don't think I can do this again. And not the
Yeah.
pain. Do you find in your work with your clients, Christina, that you help them start to work towards being different in another relationship or having a different experience? And what does that look like from your side?
Yeah, a lot of my clients also share the same belief when they see the statistics, because I think we are 70% more likely to get divorced once we've been divorced a first time. But what that just tells me is that people are not committed to doing the work. So I definitely want to shout out your clients who are watching this, because it really does show that you're committed to your growth and you're committed to your healing. And even that is just such a big step. There's so many people that carry on with the narrative that they end the marriage in, and they sort of come to their own conclusions. They're working their way through the world, thinking that they're the victim or blaming the other person, and then coming into another relationship thinking that that possibly might be the solution. That's going to soothe them. And then realizing again, here we have failed marriage number two.
Right. Same
And
communication
so
problems, same missing of each other.
yeah. So, to anybody watching, I definitely commend you. It is not easy. You do have to be incredibly brave to navigate this black hole that we have been speaking about the last few minutes. But that percentage, that 70% of people get divorced a second time, it just tells me that people aren't doing the work. They're not doing the work to change the patterns that got them there in the first place. But if we begin to do the work, which is a lot of what you and I teach, you are essentially a different person. I definitely don't recognize the person that I was in my marriage. I am completely different. And I actually can have friends and family and the people closest to me who are like, you really are kind of like a whole new person. And it's actually a big compliment, because what I realize is that the person who I was going into the marriage was very damaged to begin with. I had a lot of work to do prior to going into the marriage, but that's often what I see with the women that I speak to as well, is that there's a lot of layers in there that need to get healed. But once you begin to heal even just one layer, for example, perhaps inner child complexes or issues that you have around your parents or anything with your past, even just healing one thing, you're different in how you go forward into the world.
That's such a hopeful piece of that message, right? Because, that divorce rate and the second marriage divorce rate, it's like, okay, so people aren't doing the work. And like you said, it's not easy work to navigate that black hole, but there is, when you do any part of it, right now, you're different from the people that are in those statistics. You have made a shift inside yourself that does shift how you connect.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think what if scientists discovered, I think there's now 9 different dimensions that scientists have been able to discover. We have like 3D and 4D and 5D and all these different dimensions. And so I think they've been able to discover like 9, don't quote me on that, but that just tells us that our life, everything's linear with time. So our life could be going this way, but there's also 9 other different variations that our life could go in. And all it takes is one shift from one thing. And so even though it seems like our life is going to go from here to here, nothing is for certain. It doesn't ever mean that we're going to end here. We end here when we refuse to change, when we stay the same. But when we begin to change, we start to vary all of the different possibilities and all of the options.
Mhm.
So I definitely like to look at it that way.
Yeah. And kind of a funny thought here, Christina, but I want to say too, for people who are watching, and especially for men, like you are an example of the fact that women do this work. So that's the other thing that I hear men being afraid of is when they start to do it and they're like, oh, there's stuff I need to learn about my emotions. Wow, there's patterns, like you said, from childhood, there's habits, there's things I brought into this marriage. And they start to do the work and they start to explore and they start to make these shifts. And then they go, is anybody else doing this? Right? Are any women doing this? And you are, and your clients are. And I think that's a really hopeful thing because it does feel so alone, right? And I think both men and women get caught in that of feeling alone in it and then also worrying that maybe they won't be able to find somebody who's equally interested in having a new kind of relationship or having that deeper communication. So it's very hopeful to talk to you for them too, because obviously there are those people out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I could even say with my current partner, if you were to meet him compared to my ex husband, they always say like sometimes people have a type or they're attracted to, certain people that have certain characteristics or things like that. Night and day.
But you're this new
um,
person, right? And you're
I'm
attracted
this
to
new
the
person.
new. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's like a testament as well. My partner is extremely emotionally available. He knows my journey, he knows my path, he knows my work that I do and the things that interest me. Especially in this work, like I like to go really deep into all sorts of emotional healing, psychology, things like that. So when I met him, it was like such a breath of fresh air to meet someone who was so emotionally available and able to be such a mirror for me with the work that I'm doing now and at the level of emotional intelligence that I'm at now. So there's definitely people out there.
Congratulations to both of you. I'm really excited that you found each other and just that piece of being emotionally available because it's
Mm.
that more than the solution. It's how can I just be present with you emotionally and can we be present with each other emotionally and allow that? And I think that so much of us just don't get that from childhood, even, right?
Yeah.
Like I think as
The
a
witness.
the witness, yeah. Do we witness children's emotions? So often we just tell children they shouldn't have them, right? Like we punish
Mm.
them for emotions. You have to go in timeout because you're too emotional. So I think so often, like I have a lot of clients who are like, oh my gosh, I'm 55 years old and I'm just starting to explore this now. And, it feels like so much work and so much effort, but I just feel like it's such a cool thing that people are finding this kind of work at all, because I think our society just is not, our culture right now doesn't value that emotional world. I think sadly, it does often take these incredibly traumatic experiences like divorce for people to find that emotional world or kind of be forced into learning how to manage it. Do you see that those childhood experiences playing a big role for your clients, Christina?
I do. They always say that women choose a partner who mirrors their father figure of who they were as a child. I think it's similar for men as well. But yeah, I definitely see a connection when I start to talk to women about who their current partner is or what they currently struggle with, who they attract, and in correlation to some of the issues that they experienced as either young children or even young women, some of the behaviors that they were able to consciously pick up from either their biological father or a father figure, or just other male figures who were around at that time of their life.
Yeah, that is interesting, right? To see your parents kind of mirrored in your choice of partner as like a new arena to live out these same patterns that we learned. Christina,
Yeah.
could you just give us in these last few minutes here, is there any emotional tool or tip or technique that, because what you've described is really both men and women are struggling with the same things, right? It's this intensely lonely experience of deeply painful, difficult emotions. Is there one tool, one strategy you would offer people to start working through that?
Yeah, I think one of the easiest things that I recommend is getting in touch with nature.
Okay.
Yeah, getting in touch with nature can bring a whole new perspective because what we don't realize often in our lives as we're coming and going and working and home and dealing with all the things, nature has its own life flow going on. As
Yeah.
seasons change, it's very apparent that nature has its own flow. Even, we see in full moons and things like that if you want to go deeper into astrology, but there's a whole other world happening out there, guys. And if we make a little bit of time to go outside and just observe, things that are happening in nature, whether you're observing a butterfly going from plant to plant or a bird that's flying, and you kind of wonder, like, wow, what does the world look like for them? Even for a tree, anything that's living, I feel is such a great way to be able to begin to notice things outside of our own personal rhythm that can help us to expand the way that we look at things. And we're able to observe just another way of life, another rhythm. And it's almost meditative. We can go out and sit in nature. Oftentimes it's really quiet, and we have to sort of pick up on all of these other subtleties. So that's my favorite easy tip when I feel like I just can't see what the solution might be, and I maybe feel triggered or flared up, and I don't necessarily have all of the logical answers of like all of my teachings and my things that I've learned and picked up. And I'm like, okay, just get outside, take my shoes off, put my feet on the ground, and just observe. And we'll go from there.
I love it. It's like a hack for your nervous system, right? When you're
Yes.
you're too revved up, you're too anxious, you're too upset to access all of your knowledge. That's a way to reconnect and slow down and calm down.
And it teaches us to be a witness.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. If I can be a witness to the natural world, does that kind of give me a strategy, a roadmap for being a witness to other people's experiences or emotions? Oh, I love that, Christina. It teaches us to be a witness. Christina, what is the best way for people to connect with you? If somebody wants to work with you or learn more or just listen to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so you can find my podcast on all platforms right now, Spotify, Apple, whatever works best for you. It's Her Heart Heals Divorce Radio. I'm also very active on Instagram. My handle is at Her Heart Heals, and on my website, it's herheartheals.com.
Thank you so much for coming and talking about these things. I feel like in the world of divorce, often it's like a men versus women field. And I just love you broke right through that today, because so many of the things that you described women experiencing are exactly what the men I talk to tell me they're experiencing. And thank you so much for coming and sharing that perspective with me and with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Like you said, we share a lot of similarities. I have our episode where you are a guest on the Her Heart Heals podcast coming out. The conversation also carries on there as well, where we're just kind of like, wow, your clients too? So are my clients. We see a lot of that. So yeah, this was great. Thank you so much.
If you found this video helpful, then you have to check out my free masterclass, How to Take Back Control of Your Life After Divorce. In that hour-long masterclass, I go into way more detail than I can cover on these YouTube videos about how specifically to start to heal, to stop the painful emotions, regain your confidence, and take back control of your future. I break it down into steps and give you a lot of actionable items that you can start using right now today to start feeling better. You'll find the link in the video description below under free masterclass, How to Take Back Control of Your Life After Divorce. I hope to see you on the masterclass and in the next video here on YouTube. Thanks for watching.